This, my friends, is the 2025 Triumph Speed Twin 1200, a very fine choice of retro motorcycle, especially if you want something that's a little bit quick. The thing is, for the new model year, we've actually now got two variants with a slightly more relaxed base model at a more affordable price point, but then also this RS model, which is a bit more tasty. So which one is right for which kind of rider? And also, is this RS model worth the extra? Well, I've been lucky enough to ride both here on the press launch in Mallorca, and so in this video we'll go through all of the key differences to find out. But before we get started, a massive thanks to REBELHORN for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. In all of the riding footage that I shot yesterday, I'm wearing their Hunter 2 classic leather jacket, which I think looks absolutely fantastic with these bikes, but also packs plenty of protection, and all for a really competitive price. Then I paired it with their VANDAL jeans and boots, both of which I think look good enough to wear off the bike, but again have all the armor and sturdy bits that you need to feel safe out on the road. I absolutely love wearing their stuff, and so do check out the link down in the description below to find out more. And once again, a huge thanks to REBELHORN for their support and making videos like this one possible. Now, naturally, there are plenty of similarities with these two bikes, so we'll tackle those first, including the engine, which is the 1200cc high-power variant of the Bonneville Parallel Twin. They've given it a little bit more power for 2025, a bit more torque as well, but between the two models, they're the exact same, and so it isn't really a differentiating factor. The frame is also the same, and then you've got this new hybrid digital dash in the cockpit, along with some of the styling elements as well, but I think that's pretty much where the commonalities end, and there are plenty of differences elsewhere on the bike. The general theme here is that this base model is more so built to be a day-to-day all-rounder, whereas with the RS, you can pay a little bit more for a bike that's more performance-orientated and will more so reward, more aggressive riding. And look, one of the key areas that's gonna affect how these two bikes feel out on the road is with the suspension, with this base model getting a Marzocchi upside-down fork and Marzocchi twin shocks at the rear that are largely non-adjustable. You do have preload on the shocks, of course, so if you do take a passenger or luggage, then you can get the sag of the bike set up right to make sure the stand sits level. But if you want to start playing with the damping settings and getting the bike dialed into your particular riding style or taste or the environment or even your bodily dimensions, then certainly the adjustable fork on the RS model and the fully adjustable Öhlins shocks are going to make it look really quite appealing. On top of that though, beyond the adjustability, there is a different feel to the suspension. The RS is a little firmer, so it's definitely more suited to that aggressive riding where there's more weight transfer, whereas this base model feels a touch more cushy and comfortable, and so that of course makes it feel a bit more forgiving for day-to-day duties. Which one is right for you really does depend on the sort of riding that you're intending to do, but what I will say is both of them are a decent step up from the previous generation, which was really quite basic on the shocks. Then you've also got to consider the braking, with this RS model getting the best of the best in terms of componentry. It's got Brembo stylema, monoblock radially mounted 4-pot calipers, and also a Brembo radial master cylinder, which is both span and ratio adjustable. This is the sort of braking setup that you're used to finding on a modern looking sporty naked bike, or even plenty of sports bikes too, and so the result out on the road is lots of feel, lots of power, and a very crisp braking setup. As for the standard bike, well, of course, to hit that more aggressive price point, they've had to make some compromises on the sort of componentry front, and so that one gets Triumph branded hardware without the sort of fancy big name look. At the same time though, it's still a radially mounted caliper, a radial master cylinder, there's some adjustability as well, and so it's perfectly adequate. In fact, it's better than perfectly adequate, if not quite as sporty feeling and crisp as the RS model. So look, if you're someone who likes charging into corners and braking late and really likes that sporty feel from your retro bike, then this one will feel better to you probably. But I wouldn't write off the standard model just based upon the braking. I think they probably perform better than you might expect. Now, the wheels are newly designed for 2025, and they're the same cast aluminium design on both, with 17 inches front and rear, but they are wearing slightly different rubber, with Metzeler's Sportecs on this base bike and then the Roadtecs on the RS. Thing is though, realistically, for the sort of riding that this bike is intended for, I'd actually argue that potentially something with a bit more wet weather ability is realistically going to be the better choice. And so I'd actually say potentially it'd be my preference to have these Sportecs fitted on that bike too. Still though, I wouldn't say consumables are necessarily a good way to make a buying decision. You can always swap the tyres on either of these bikes, but it is another difference to be aware of if you're choosing between the two, and if you do want to swap the tyres, it's another cost to factor in. So I think you can probably start to see that there is a slightly different personality to each of these two bikes, and that's continued with the ergonomics. And allow me to demonstrate. You see, this being the more sporty bike has pretty much the same seat position, but the bars are a little bit further forward and the pegs are up and back. So this one has you a little bit more over the front, which definitely does suit the personality of the RS. This base model though, well, if you look at the risers on the bars, you can see they're significantly higher and further back. And so that has your back angle a little more upright, which does give it a touch more of that all-day comfort. Now, to pivot you back, they've also got the pegs a little further forward and lower. And so certainly it's the one that feels more natural when you pull away and lift your feet up for the pegs. I found myself a little bit having to shuffle them back and search for the right position on the RS. Which one feels best to you, I think, will depend on where you're coming from. If you're used to riding sporty bikes, then this one might feel more familiar, whereas this bike is possibly better suited to someone who rides a retro or a Bonneville and maybe just wants something a little more performance biased. Now, a knock-on effect of moving those foot pegs or having the two different positions means that there isn't actually the option, even in the accessories catalogue, to fit a quick shifter to the standard bike. There just isn't space for the hardware under the pegs there. This one though can accommodate it because the pegs are further up and back, and the quick shifter is actually standard fit on this bike. So again, playing into that sporty nature. I will say it's not the smoothest quick shifter, so maybe a bit of clutch at lower speeds and lower revs is still preferable. But if you do have the engine working a bit harder and considering it's standard fit, so you're not paying extra for it, you know, it's something that's nice to have. Then with the riding modes, there's just rain and road on this bike. This one gets a sport mode as well. And so those two things combined, you know, despite the fact that the engines are basically the same, do give this one a more sporty feel under acceleration. Now, generally with bikes, I think it's fair to say if you pay a bit more, you get a bit more, and that's also true with some of the finish, with a couple of little differentiators like the plastic mudguards front and rear on this bike, as opposed to the brushed aluminium on the RS. It has to be said as well, stuff like Öhlins shocks and Brembo brakes does give the bike a more sporty image and a bit of a visual lift. And then there's also a little more detail in stuff like the paintwork on the tank, with the RS logo running along the bottom and those nice stripes there that sort of mirror the cooling fins just beneath it on the engine there. Now, both of them, in my opinion, are fantastic looking bikes with that nice little sporty take on the Bonneville platform, but undoubtedly, if you see them both in the flesh, the RS is the one that just looks that bit more desirable. But look, for a lot of people, I think this one's going to come down to the price, because there is a fairly significant difference, with the base model costing about 12.5 grand and this one costing about 14.5. That's a £2,000 difference, which can go a long way on other stuff for your biking hobby. And so if you don't think you're really going to make use of the extra performance in this bike, then it absolutely makes sense to go for the standard one, where you're still getting a lot of the same brilliant fundamentals. As for my personal pick though, well, I started the day on the RS and spent most of the morning riding this bike, and then switched to the base model in the afternoon and thought actually maybe the extra comfort was more enjoyable, even if it came a little at the sacrifice of that sort of sharper feel. But then, right at the end of the day, I swapped back onto the RS model and had such a blast, and remembered that it is fun to have a quick shifter. The more lively feel to the throttle with the sport mode really put a grin on my face. And so even though it is at the top end of what you might pay for a sporty retro bike, well, I did come off the bike feeling like it probably is worth it. As always though, I'd love to know which bike you pick, so do let me know down in the comments below. And also I'll put my full review of the RS, in which you'll get a little bit more detail, on the screen now, so you can give it a click and give it a watch in case you haven't already. Also, do hit subscribe if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.